In the heart of a glittering metropolis, where wealth and power dictate the lives of many, lived a billionaire whose name was synonymous with success and influence. Known for his commanding presence in the business world, his luxurious lifestyle attracted constant attention from the media and the public alike. At his side was his pregnant wife, a woman of grace and resilience, carrying their unborn child amidst the turmoil that surrounded their relationship. But woven into this high-stakes story was a figure that complicated everything, the mistress, whose presence threatened to unravel the carefully curated image of this wealthy family. This wasn't just a tale of infidelity, it was a complex, emotionally charged love triangle that captivated and scandalized society. The billionaire's marriage, outwardly perfect and envied by many, was anything but simple beneath the surface. The wife, despite her advancing pregnancy, faced a growing storm of humiliation and heartache, caught between her devotion to her family and the painful reality of her husband's betrayal. Meanwhile, the mistress played a calculated role, navigating the shadows of secrecy and public scrutiny, determined to claim her place in the billionaire's life. Their tangled relationships unfolded against the backdrop of a society that idolizes wealth but often overlooks the human cost behind the glamour. The social context here is crucial. In a world where appearances matter more than truth, the lines between loyalty and deceit blur, and the stakes are as high as the skyscrapers that surround them. As the story unfolds, tension simmers beneath every interaction. The billionaire's control, the wife's vulnerability, and the mistress's ambition create a volatile mix that threatens to explode at any moment. This emotional drama is not just about personal relationships, it reflects deeper struggles for power, respect, and identity within a world that demands perfection. Every glance, every whispered conversation, and every public appearance builds toward a climactic moment that will leave everyone involved forever changed. The pregnant wife, who many expected to silently endure her fate, is about to take an action so unexpected it will shock everyone who witnesses it. This is the story of betrayal, courage, and resilience, a story that grabs attention because it challenges the very ideas of love and loyalty. Imagine the tension in a room filled with the elite and the press, all eyes on the billionaire's wife as she stands before the mistress, forced into an apology that was meant to break her spirit. But instead of crumbling, what she does next leaves the audience speechless and changes the narrative entirely. The dramatic scene on stage becomes more than just a confrontation, it becomes a defining moment that questions who truly holds power in this tangled web. It is a moment that resonates far beyond the immediate players and sparks conversations about dignity, justice, and the strength of the human spirit. In the coming pages, this story will peel back the layers of this dramatic event, revealing the intricate emotions, the fallout, and the surprising aftermath. It is a tale that invites you to look beyond the surface and understand the complexities of a love triangle marked by betrayal and unexpected bravery. Prepare to be drawn into a world where nothing is quite as it seems, and where one woman's courageous act changes everything, a moment that will leave everyone watching completely speechless. The billionaire was a man whose very name commanded respect and attention in the highest echelons of society. With a sharp intellect and an unwavering drive, he built a vast empire that spanned industries from real estate to technology. His public persona was one of unshakable confidence and dominance, a figure who seemed to control every situation with ease and precision. Behind the scenes, however, his personality was complex, a blend of charm and ruthlessness, capable of inspiring loyalty but also fear. His influence extended far beyond boardrooms, shaping social circles and political alliances. People admired him for his success, envied his wealth, but often whispered about the cold calculation that fueled his rise. This billionaire's life was one of power, control, and high stakes, where every decision was a calculated move in a larger game of influence and legacy. His wife, now visibly pregnant, came from a very different world. Raised in a modest but loving family, she was a woman of warmth, kindness, and quiet strength. Unlike the billionaire's fast-paced, high-pressure environment, her life before marriage was more grounded and simple. She had dreams and ambitions, but her love for her husband led her to embrace a life of luxury and public attention. Though she admired his achievements and was proud to be by his side, she often struggled with the pressures that came with being married to such a powerful man. The pregnancy, which should have been a time of joy and hope, was instead overshadowed by uncertainty and emotional strain. Her feelings about the marriage were mixed, deep affection tempered by moments of loneliness and doubt, especially as she sensed changes in her husband's behavior. She was determined to protect her unborn child and preserve her family, even as the foundation beneath them began to crack. Before the mistress's presence darkened their relationship, the billionaire and his wife shared moments of genuine connection and affection. They attended lavish events together, presented a united front to the public, and enjoyed the privileges their status afforded. Their relationship, while complicated by the demands of his career and their social obligations, held an underlying sense of partnership. The wife often believed that their love was strong enough to withstand any storm. Yet, subtle signs of strain were already appearing: longer absences, curt phone calls, and the cold distance that sometimes settled between them. The wife tried to dismiss these as temporary stresses, hoping they would pass. But these early cracks foreshadowed the more profound challenges that lay ahead, especially once the mistress entered the picture. The mistress's arrival was subtle but impactful. At first, she was just a name whispered in exclusive circles, a business associate, a socialite with a magnetic charm who seemed to effortlessly captivate the billionaire's attention. Unlike the wife's quiet, reserved demeanor, the mistress was bold, confident, and unapologetically ambitious. She sought the spotlight in a way that contrasted sharply with the wife's more traditional role. Their first encounters were shrouded in secrecy, carefully hidden from the public eye and the wife's knowledge. Yet, as the mistress grew bolder, signs of her influence became impossible to ignore. The billionaire's time and attention shifted, invitations were extended to secret dinners, and the energy between the two became undeniable. For the wife, these changes were painful to acknowledge but difficult to confront, especially while carrying their unborn child. The mistress's entrance marked the beginning of a tumultuous chapter, one that would challenge loyalties, expose vulnerabilities, and lead to a dramatic confrontation that no one could have predicted. This background sets the stage for understanding the complex emotions and tensions that shape the relationships involved. It highlights the contrast between the billionaire's commanding presence and the wife's quiet resilience, as well as the disruptive force the mistress represented. Together, these elements form the foundation for the intense drama that would soon unfold, revealing the raw realities behind a seemingly perfect life. As the story progresses, the personal struggles, power plays, and emotional battles that define this trio will become clearer, offering a deeper insight into what really happens when love, power, and betrayal collide. The mistress was a woman who seemed to thrive in the world of luxury and power, yet she carried with her an air of mystery that intrigued as much as it unsettled those around her. She was known for her striking appearance, poised, confident, and effortlessly glamorous. Unlike the wife, whose demeanor was gentle and reserved, the mistress was bold and unapologetic, fully aware of the effect she had on people, especially powerful men like the billionaire. Her motivations were complex. On the surface, it appeared she sought the wealth and status that came with the relationship, but beneath that ambition lay a desire for influence and control. She was not content with being just a secret. She wanted to reshape the dynamics to her favor, claiming a place not just beside the billionaire but within his world and social standing. Her relationship with him was a blend of passion, manipulation, and mutual benefit. While the billionaire enjoyed the mistress's company and her ability to challenge him in ways his wife never had, she, in turn, gained access to his wealth and connections that propelled her own aspirations. The mistress's lifestyle was in many ways the opposite of the wife's. Where the wife embodied tradition and stability, the mistress represented a modern, fast-paced life filled with glamorous parties, exclusive events, and a social calendar that seemed to burn with excitement. Her personality was magnetic and assertive, unafraid to speak her mind or make bold moves. She surrounded herself with a circle of influential friends and was known for her sharp wit and keen business sense. This contrast created a stark division in how the two women were perceived, not only by the billionaire but also by society at large. The wife was seen as the dutiful partner, the nurturing soon-to-be mother, and the embodiment of family values. The mistress, meanwhile, was cast in a more controversial light, both admired for her confidence and vilified as a disruptor. This dynamic fueled much of the tension between them, as each represented not only a different lifestyle but also a competing claim on the billionaire's loyalty and attention. Ambition was the mistress's driving force. She was not content to remain in the shadows, merely the other woman waiting quietly for scraps of affection. Instead, she actively sought to carve out a role that gave her power and recognition. Her influence on the billionaire grew steadily. She understood how to appeal to his ego and challenge his worldview, offering a fresh perspective that invigorated him. It was clear to many close to the billionaire that the mistress had a subtle but undeniable hold over him. She pushed boundaries and expectations, often encouraging decisions that favored her interests. This influence extended beyond personal matters into the billionaire's business and social engagements, creating ripples that concerned not only the wife but also the billionaire's inner circle. Her ambition and savvy made her a formidable figure, capable of shaping the billionaire's world in ways that went far beyond a typical affair. Public perception of the mistress was a complicated mix of fascination and judgment. The media often painted her as a femme fatale, a woman who used her charm and cunning to disrupt a marriage and claim a powerful man's attention. Rumors swirled about secret meetings, lavish gifts, and whispered deals, fueling a narrative that cast her as both villain and victim. Some admired her for her confidence and independence, viewing her as a woman who dared to live on her own terms in a world dominated by men and money. Others criticized her harshly, accusing her of betrayal and manipulation. This polarized view reflected broader societal attitudes about women who defy traditional roles and challenge the status quo. For the billionaire's wife, the mistress was not just a rival but a symbol of everything threatening her marriage and future. Yet, for the mistress herself, public opinion mattered little. She was focused on her own goals, willing to endure scrutiny and scandal to achieve the place she believed she deserved. It was supposed to be a celebration, a grand charity gala hosted at one of the city's most opulent hotels, where crystal chandeliers sparkled like stars above a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The guest list included celebrities, CEOs, politicians, and socialites, all mingling over champagne and whispered gossip. Among the attendees was the billionaire, arriving with his pregnant wife on one arm and his publicist trailing just behind. The wife, dressed in a soft satin gown that gently wrapped around her growing belly, had painted on a polite smile, trying her best to fulfill her role with grace. But beneath her calm exterior, a storm brewed. She had noticed the mistress in the crowd, confident, radiant, and entirely too comfortable in this space that once belonged solely to her. Tension had been building for weeks. There had been rumors that the mistress would be attending, and the wife had hoped, begged even, that her husband would keep her out of the spotlight for the sake of their unborn child. But the billionaire, obsessed with maintaining control of the narrative, insisted on his wife attending as a symbol of strength and unity, while quietly extending an invitation to the mistress as well. He wanted to show the world he could handle both worlds, manage both women, and avoid scandal. But what unfolded that evening would shatter that illusion entirely. Midway through the evening, just after the final auction item was announced, the billionaire made a speech thanking his supporters. As he stood under the glow of the stage lights, holding his wife's hand, he suddenly paused and gestured to the mistress, seated near the front. The crowd's polite applause faded into an uneasy silence. What came next would forever redefine the story of that night. Turning to his wife, the billionaire, with a cold but practiced smile, said, "Before we continue, I think it's time we clear the air. My wife has something to say." Confused, the pregnant woman looked up at him, her heart pounding. "Say what?" she asked in a hushed voice, her smile wavering. But he gently squeezed her hand, firmly, authoritatively, and leaned closer, his voice low but unmistakably firm. "Apologize. To her. Right now." The wife followed his gaze and realized exactly who he meant. The room held its breath. Time seemed to freeze. Every eye turned toward the stage, watching the pregnant wife as she stood frozen, the weight of betrayal and public humiliation pressing down on her chest. She looked at the mistress, who sat with a smug expression, basking in the spotlight. The humiliation burned through the wife like acid, her cheeks flushed, her hands trembled. 1,000 thoughts rushed through her mind, the child growing inside her, the vows she believed meant something, and the hundreds of cameras now trained on her, waiting to capture her collapse. Her lips parted, and for a moment, it looked as though she might go through with it, offer a forced apology to maintain the peace, to avoid scandal, to keep her family intact. But what happened next silenced the entire ballroom. Instead of bowing her head and whispering an apology, she straightened her shoulders and took a slow, deliberate step forward. Her voice rang out, calm but powerful. If anyone deserves an apology tonight, it's not her. It's every woman who's ever been shamed for someone else's lies. Gasps echoed through the crowd as her eyes locked with her husband's, cold and unwavering. You invited me here as your wife, as the mother of your child, and you humiliate me in front of the world? You want to talk about apologies? Maybe you should be the one giving them. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. The billionaire's smile vanished, replaced with a mixture of shock and rage. The mistress's confident expression faltered, as whispers began rippling through the audience like wildfire. Guests exchanged stunned glances, and phones were quickly raised to record the moment. The media frenzy erupted within minutes. Within hours, clips of the wife's bold declaration went viral across social platforms. Headlines screamed with phrases like "Pregnant wife snaps back at billionaire" and "Scandal at the gala, mistress versus mother." What was meant to be a quiet power play by the billionaire had turned into a PR nightmare. The wife's defiance not only won the sympathy and admiration of millions but also exposed the cracks in the billionaire's carefully constructed image. News anchors analyzed the moment frame by frame. Psychologists were brought in to discuss the emotional abuse and power dynamics at play. Feminists hailed the wife's strength, and even casual observers couldn't look away. The humiliation that was meant to break her instead became the very moment that redefined her, and marked the beginning of the end for the perfect illusion the billionaire had worked so hard to maintain. The room was still vibrating with the weight of her words when the pregnant wife stepped away from her husband's side and walked to the edge of the stage. Her heels clicked against the polished wood floor, echoing through the silence as every guest, camera, and breathless journalist followed her every move. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. Her back was straight, her face calm, elegant, poised, and commanding in a way no one expected. This was not the image of the humiliated wife the world had come to expect from stories like this. She wasn't broken. She was powerful. She stood in front of the mistress, who remained seated, now visibly uneasy. The smugness that had defined her expression for much of the evening had melted into cautious surprise. The wife stared at her, silent for a moment, before lifting the microphone to her lips. "You think I came here tonight to apologize to you?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing. "I came here because I believed my husband still respected me. I was wrong." The audience was stunned. Some guests shifted in their seats. Some lowered their eyes, embarrassed on the billionaire's behalf. The wife took a deep breath and continued, "I will not apologize for being loyal. I will not apologize for building a life and a family. And I will certainly never apologize to a woman who knowingly tried to destroy both." It was a moment so raw, so honest, that no one knew how to respond. The wife didn't shout. She didn't curse. She didn't collapse. She simply told the truth, publicly, unapologetically. Then, with quiet determination, she turned back toward her husband. Her gaze was colder than before. "And you," she said, "you let this happen. You chose this humiliation for me and our unborn child. I won't forget that." She handed him the microphone and stepped down from the stage. Her departure was not a retreat, it was a declaration. She didn't storm off or fall into tears. She walked slowly, gracefully, with her hands protectively over her belly, like a queen who had just reclaimed her crown. That moment shifted everything. What she did wasn't just unexpected, it was strategic. She knew this was more than a fight between women. This was a power play set on a global stage, one where every gesture would be dissected and judged. But instead of shrinking into victimhood, she rose above it. She didn't defend herself with bitterness, she used dignity as her weapon. And in doing so, she flipped the narrative. She became a symbol not of weakness, but of courage. She didn't beg for sympathy, she demanded respect. That choice changed how the world saw her. And more importantly, it shattered the billionaire's illusion of control. Within hours, the internet lit up. Hashtags like #StandWithTheWife and #GraceUnderFire trended worldwide. Social media flooded with support from women who saw their own stories reflected in her quiet defiance. Journalists called it a masterclass in reclaiming power. Editorials applauded her composure and shamed the billionaire for using his influence to orchestrate such a cruel spectacle. What had started as a planned public relations stunt quickly became a case study in public humiliation, his, not hers. The mistress, once so emboldened, now found herself at the center of sharp criticism. Online forums dissected her smirk, her posture, her audacity. The applause she may have expected never came. Even those who had once admired her confidence began to question her integrity. She had miscalculated, believing the wife would bow down. But instead, she became the silent figure in the background, forgotten as the wife's powerful words stole the spotlight. Even within the billionaire's inner circle, the fallout was immediate. Board members began to question his judgment. Business partners worried about the backlash. His PR team scrambled to control the narrative, but it was too late. The wife's voice had become louder than theirs. Her response exposed the emotional manipulation he had tried to mask with charm and money. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that no amount of wealth could buy back dignity once it was thrown away. In the days that followed, the wife received interview requests, offers from women's advocacy groups, and messages of solidarity from strangers around the world. But she didn't chase the fame. She remained grounded, focused on protecting her child and rebuilding her life, not for show, but for survival. What she had done on that stage wasn't for applause, it was for herself, for her baby, and for every woman who had ever been told to apologize when they weren't the one at fault. That single act of defiance redefined her legacy and left everyone, mistress, husband, and audience alike, utterly speechless. In the quiet days that followed the gala, the emotional weight of the evening settled like a thick fog over the pregnant wife's world. While her public display of strength had won her widespread admiration, behind closed doors, the damage ran deep. The humiliation she had endured wasn't just about the moment on stage, it was the culmination of months, even years, of subtle betrayals and emotional neglect. She had entered the marriage with dreams of building a life rooted in love and mutual respect, but now, those dreams were shattered. Though she had held her head high that night, she often found herself crying alone in the early hours of the morning, hand resting on her belly, wondering how she would explain this part of her story to the child growing inside her. The stress, the anxiety, and the loneliness weighed heavily on her. The very man who was supposed to protect her had chosen to expose her to shame. She questioned her own worth, her decisions, and whether she had ignored red flags in the name of love. Though she projected calm to the world, inside she was battling guilt, rage, heartbreak, and a quiet fear about what her future would look like as both a mother and a woman rebuilding her life. For the mistress, the aftermath was more complicated than she had imagined. Though she had entered the gala with confidence, expecting a private victory or public validation, what transpired left her shaken. At first, she attempted to spin the narrative in her favor, insisting to those close to her that the wife's reaction was exaggerated, even theatrical. But deep down, the mistress couldn't deny the growing sense of insecurity that gnawed at her. The wife's strength had exposed something in her, the fragile foundation on which she had built her relationship with the billionaire. She had thought herself in control, believing that her presence and allure gave her the upper hand. But the world saw the truth. Instead of being celebrated, she was scrutinized, and the glances she received now felt more like judgment than admiration. Jealousy began to creep in, not over the billionaire, but over the wife's composure, the loyalty she commanded from the public, and the unexpected resilience that made her unforgettable. The mistress realized that she hadn't won anything. She had simply become part of a painful, very public tragedy, and she wasn't the hero of the story. The billionaire, on the other hand, struggled to maintain the illusion that he was still in control. Internally, he was unraveling. He had underestimated the emotional fallout and overestimated his ability to manipulate the situation. His pride had blinded him, and now he was facing the consequences. For the first time, cracks appeared in his facade. His carefully curated image was damaged. Business partners became distant, and even trusted friends expressed concern about his judgment. Yet, what troubled him most wasn't the loss of public approval, it was the loss of power within his own household. The wife's refusal to bend, her voice ringing out across that stage, haunted him. It challenged his perception of control and exposed how little he truly understood her. Still, his emotional response remained shallow, masked by frustration and attempts at damage control. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to fix things. Instead, he retreated, consumed by ego, unsure how to face a woman who had shown more courage than he ever expected. The emotional consequences rippled beyond the three of them, reaching into the life of the child not yet born. The unborn baby, innocent and unaware, was already entering a world filled with tension and betrayal. The mother, despite her pain, did everything she could to create a safe and calm environment, shielding the child from the chaos around her. But the stress she carried could not be entirely hidden. The pressure on her heart, the anxiety in her breath, it all affected the child growing within. The family dynamics had already shifted. Trust was broken. Roles were being redefined. And though the child would be born into privilege, they would also be born into a fractured home where love had been tested and loyalty had been shattered. Still, in the silence of her private moments, the wife held her belly and whispered promises of protection and strength, determined to turn her pain into something that would never reach her child. The moment the pregnant wife walked off that stage, the real explosion happened, not in the ballroom, but online. Within minutes, videos of her powerful statement were clipped, shared, and replayed across every major social media platform. On TikTok, emotional edits of her walking away to dramatic music flooded For You pages. Twitter erupted with hashtags like #WifeNotWeak, #PregnantPower, and #StateShowdown, with millions weighing in. Memes surfaced almost instantly, some humorous, others poignant, comparing the wife's grace to that of historical heroines and fictional queens. Users reposted the viral moment with captions like, "She didn't just walk away, she walked through fire, and this is how you reclaim your narrative." Across the world, people who had never heard of the couple before now had opinions, theories, and emotional investments. Some even dubbed her the pregnant Princess Diana of 2025. Tabloids wasted no time jumping on the frenzy. By the next morning, every major gossip site and entertainment blog featured bold headlines with variations of, "Humiliated wife destroys billionaire husband on stage," or "Mistress left speechless as pregnant wife walks away with dignity." Paparazzi began swarming the wife's residence, desperate for a photo or quote, while journalists scoured her social media accounts and family connections for deeper context. Influencers, especially in the lifestyle, fashion, and feminist spaces, quickly chose sides. Many made Instagram reels and YouTube videos breaking down the event, frame by frame, analyzing body language and tone. Some invited psychologists and relationship experts to offer commentary. It wasn't just gossip, it became a cultural moment. The wife's dress designer trended for 3 days. An advocacy group for pregnant women invited her to be a keynote speaker. She had become more than a woman betrayed, she was now a symbol of public empowerment. Still, not everyone rallied behind her. A smaller but vocal group sided with the mistress, framing her as a woman also trapped in the billionaire's manipulative world. Some claimed the wife's speech, while powerful, was performative. Others speculated she had stayed in the marriage too long for personal gain. The audience became divided. Teen wife and teen mistress emerged, debating everything from who truly suffered more, to whether either woman was being manipulated by a much larger machine. But even with the mixed opinions, one thing was undeniable, the billionaire's plan had completely backfired. His public image, once associated with power and sophistication, now bore the marks of shame and disgrace. Investors began distancing themselves. Stock prices for his publicly traded companies dipped as media analysts questioned his judgment. A planned partnership with a global tech firm was quietly shelved, and one of his brand ambassadors stepped away, citing misalignment of values. Business leaders, always wary of bad press, began treating him as a liability. While he tried to release a carefully written statement emphasizing a private family matter taken out of context, the public wasn't buying it. Comment sections filled with eye-roll emojis, sarcastic responses, and comparisons to other disgraced moguls. His attempts at damage control were too little, too late. What truly shook his empire wasn't just the scandal, it was how unprepared he was for the wife's bravery and how thoroughly the internet took her side. The wife hadn't just saved herself, she had turned his carefully curated legacy into a punchline. His control over the media, his ability to shape perception, had vanished in a single night. Now, every move he made was watched through a lens of suspicion and ridicule. Influencers mocked his brand. Satirists roasted him in late-night monologues. His once untouchable persona now looked frail and pitiful under the scrutiny of a public that had already chosen its victor. And while the world moved quickly, trending stories come and go, the impact of that night lingered. It had changed how people viewed power, marriage, and the dynamics of public accountability. One woman's refusal to stay silent had toppled the illusion of a man who thought he could humiliate her without consequence. And the internet, unforgiving and relentless, ensured the world would never forget. While the world watched the drama unfold on screens and in headlines, the most personal reactions came quietly, behind closed doors, from the people who truly knew the wife, the billionaire, and the mistress. For the pregnant wife, the days following the gala were filled with an overwhelming mixture of phone calls, messages, and unexpected visitors. Her parents, who had always remained quiet about her marriage out of respect, were the first to show up at her doorstep. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes, whispering, "You didn't deserve that, and we're proud of you." Her father, a quiet man not easily shaken, sat beside her for hours, simply holding her hand and offering the kind of calm presence only a father could. Their support became her anchor, helping her steady herself amid the storm. Her younger sister, fiery and outspoken, had long suspected that something was off in the marriage. She was furious when she saw the clip online, threatening to confront the billionaire herself. But instead of stirring chaos, she poured her energy into helping her sister reclaim her life, setting up a security team, filtering media requests, and coordinating with a lawyer for future decisions. Her best friends rallied behind her as well. Some had pulled away during her years in the billionaire's shadow, unsure how to support her while she lived in such an unreachable world. But now, they returned, fierce, loyal, and ready to defend her. They showed up with food, distractions, and late-night conversations that reminded her she wasn't alone. The support system she once feared she'd lost came back stronger than ever. But not every reaction brought comfort. One or two people she had considered close, friends who had mingled in the billionaire's circle, distanced themselves after the scandal. Some sent neutral, carefully worded messages that felt more like PR statements than genuine concern. Others said nothing at all. It stung, but it also clarified where her true circle stood. One betrayal hurt the most. Her former college roommate, someone she once called a sister, was later discovered to have leaked private details to a tabloid for money. That revelation shook her, reminding her how fame and scandal could twist even the closest bonds. But rather than break her, it only fueled her determination to protect what remained of her peace. On the other side, the mistress was not without her own circle of supporters, though it was far smaller and less vocal. A few socialites and influencers, known for courting controversy, publicly defended her, claiming she had been dragged into a messy marriage and was unfairly villainized by the media. These allies posted cryptic messages about double standards and female competition, subtly aimed at painting the mistress as misunderstood rather than malicious. One even hosted a podcast episode titled "Other Woman or Scapegoat?", drawing both praise and backlash. But internally, even within her circle, the support felt shaky. Some of her friends were concerned about the attention, worried it would reflect poorly on their brands or social standings. The mistress began to realize that public loyalty often came with conditions, and not everyone was willing to risk their reputation for her. As for the billionaire, his isolation became increasingly apparent. Colleagues who once sought his company began avoiding him. His siblings, especially his older sister, who had long disapproved of his lifestyle, publicly expressed support for the wife. At a family gathering a week later, she reportedly confronted him, saying, "You've not just embarrassed yourself, you've disgraced us." The family dynamics, once carefully hidden behind corporate appearances, started unraveling. His parents remained silent in public, but sources close to the family confirmed there was deep disappointment behind the scenes. Ultimately, it was the network of relationships, those who stood by the wife, those who abandoned her, and those who tried to spin the narrative, that shaped the next chapter. These connections, strained or strengthened by betrayal and loyalty, served as emotional lifelines or painful reminders. They influenced how the wife regained her footing, how the mistress faded into obscurity, and how the billionaire's once commanding presence diminished in the eyes of both the public and those closest to him. The drama may have played out on a public stage, but its consequences rippled most deeply through the private circles of family and friends who would carry the impact for years to come. In the days following the public fallout, attention quickly turned from emotional drama to legal warfare. Behind the scenes, the wife began consulting with a high-profile divorce attorney known for representing women in high-stakes cases against powerful men. Though she had not filed for divorce immediately, legal experts speculated that she was gathering documentation, texts, emails, financial records, all of which could be used to build a strong case if she chose to separate officially. One of the earliest issues on the table was the prenuptial agreement. The billionaire, always calculating, had insisted on one before their marriage. But sources close to the wife revealed that the prenup included several clauses tied to infidelity, public humiliation, and emotional distress, ironically, all of which had now come into play. With the video of the gala circulating globally and being interpreted as clear evidence of public degradation, her legal team had ample leverage to challenge certain terms and negotiate a significant settlement if the case went to court. Custody of the unborn child was another major consideration. Though the baby hadn't been born yet, the wife was already strategizing how to ensure that she would retain primary custody. She wasn't looking to shut the billionaire out completely. He was, after all, the child's father, but she wanted safeguards in place to protect her child from the instability, manipulation, and toxicity she had experienced in the marriage. Discussions with her legal team included potential co-parenting terms, visitation rights, and even limitations on media exposure, ensuring that their child would be shielded from the spotlight as much as possible. She also requested mental health evaluations and parenting assessments to be part of the legal proceedings, preparing for every possible challenge the billionaire might mount. As news of her legal moves began to leak, panic set in within the billionaire's business empire. Shareholders, already shaken by the scandal, began demanding answers. His PR advisors were replaced, and damage control campaigns were launched to reassure investors. But the damage had been done. Rumors swirled that several board members were considering forcing him to step back from leadership roles to stabilize the company's image. His empire, once thriving on his reputation of control and power, now appeared vulnerable, fractured by scandal and threatened by a very public personal breakdown. Financial analysts noted a dip in stock prices and a drop in investor confidence, linking it directly to the personal fallout and potential legal consequences. Meanwhile, the mistress found herself in murky legal territory as well. Though she hadn't broken any laws, her involvement in the scandal made her a target in ongoing legal reviews. If the wife's legal team decided to pursue claims of emotional distress or defamation, her name could be dragged into court proceedings. She was advised to go quiet, no interviews, no social media, and avoid fueling the fire. However, whispers of a tell-all book deal or paid TV appearance floated through entertainment media, suggesting that the mistress might eventually try to profit from the chaos, opening the door to even more public and legal scrutiny. With so many loose ends and high-profile personalities involved, the situation remained volatile. Legal experts predicted that more litigation could follow, custody battles, breach of contract claims, even shareholder lawsuits if the billionaire's scandal led to measurable financial losses. What had begun as a personal betrayal now spiraled into a complex legal and financial storm, threatening reputations, fortunes, and the future of everyone involved. In the weeks that followed the explosive event, the dust slowly began to settle, but the relationships at the center of the drama were irreversibly changed. The wife, once caught in the shadows of her husband's power, had stepped into her own light. Her decision came after deep introspection, long conversations with her family, and quiet moments spent alone, often with a hand resting on her growing belly. She didn't rush into anything. But when she finally spoke, she was clear. She filed for separation, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. She chose peace, dignity, and the chance to build a future where her child would grow up in a home filled with love, not control or silence. Her statement to the press was brief and measured: "This is not the ending of a marriage. It's the beginning of a life where I get to be whole, for myself and my child." Rather than disappear into a life of quiet solitude, the wife found purpose. She became a symbol of empowerment for countless women who had experienced betrayal, gaslighting, or humiliation. Invitations flooded in, from women's conferences, media outlets, and charities. She partnered with a maternal health organization to support expecting mothers going through emotional trauma. She declined lucrative offers to exploit her story, instead choosing to write a book about reclaiming self-worth while pregnant, without naming names. She wasn't interested in revenge. She was focused on rebuilding, not just her life but her identity. Friends noticed a new strength in her, not hardened or bitter, but deeply rooted in self-respect. She had walked through public fire and come out tempered, not burned. As for the mistress, the story didn't end with her standing triumphantly beside the billionaire. Quite the opposite. In the wake of the scandal, public sentiment turned sharply against her, and opportunities that once seemed abundant began to dry up. Endorsement deals were withdrawn. Invitations to elite events slowed. Even the whispers of a tell-all lost steam as people moved on to newer scandals. Eventually, she slipped out of the spotlight, fading into quiet obscurity. There were rumors she had left the city, some claimed she moved abroad, others said she found another wealthy partner, but none of it mattered anymore. She had played her role in the drama and exited without applause. The power she thought she had proved fleeting when the court of public opinion turned cold. The billionaire, once revered for his composure and dominance, found himself clawing at the remnants of his image. He launched a meticulously crafted PR campaign, donations to women's charities, staged interviews where he expressed regret, and a public statement about growing as a man and a father. But the sincerity rang hollow. No matter how hard he tried to steer the narrative, the world had already seen too much. His empire, though not entirely crumbling, had taken a hit that couldn't be reversed with money or press releases. Business partners remained cautious, and the glimmer of invincibility that had once defined him was gone. He continued to fight for partial custody, trying to present himself as a changed man, but even in court, the judge's tone toward him carried a quiet disapproval. In the end, everyone moved on, but not in the same way. The billionaire remained trapped in a limbo of managed appearances and diminished influence. The mistress vanished from relevance. But the wife? She rose. Not into fame, but into a life where she made the rules, protected her child, and chose healing over hate. The scandal had started with an attempt to shame her, but it ended with her owning the narrative. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that sometimes the most graceful exit is the one that leads you back to yourself. 1 year after the night that changed everything, the world had moved on, but the lives of those at the heart of the scandal were permanently altered. The billionaire's name, once a headline magnet, had faded from mainstream news. His companies had stabilized somewhat, but the damage to his personal brand remained. Once a sought-after speaker and a fixture at elite summits, he now kept a low profile, appearing only in controlled, tightly managed settings. Though he had retained partial custody rights, his time with the child was limited and supervised, a reflection of the court's concerns about the emotional environment. Behind the scenes, insiders said he remained distant and focused mostly on recovering his financial standing, though the spark that once drove him seemed dulled, dimmed by a fall from grace that had stripped him of his illusion of control. The mistress had all but vanished. Whatever dreams she once had of building a public persona or leveraging the scandal into a platform had dissolved in the harsh light of reality. With public sympathy never leaning in her favor, she had slipped out of the spotlight, deleting her social media accounts and quietly relocating to another country. A few gossip sites occasionally mentioned her in passing, sightings at international events or speculation about a new relationship, but the interest was lukewarm at best. She had become a footnote in someone else's story, a cautionary figure who learned that notoriety, once gained, does not always lead to power. But it was the wife whose life had transformed the most. She had given birth to a healthy baby girl named Amira just 2 months after the incident. Motherhood grounded her in ways she hadn't expected. It brought both healing and renewed purpose. She spoke often about how holding her daughter for the first time made everything that had happened feel strangely worth it, as if she had been forged through fire for the sake of something beautiful. She continued her advocacy work, now as a respected speaker on emotional resilience and women's empowerment. Her book, released under a simple title, Unbroken, became a bestseller, not because it dished out gossip, but because it offered quiet wisdom to women navigating betrayal, identity, and self-worth. Publicly, she was admired not for her scandal, but for how she had handled it. Gracefully, without theatrics. Firmly, without bitterness. She wasn't chasing revenge or fame, she was building a meaningful life on her own terms. She bought a modest home in a peaceful neighborhood, surrounded by trees and sunlight, far from paparazzi. Her days were filled with diaper changes, story time, late-night feedings, and the slow, steady return to peace. Her face no longer appeared in tabloids, but in university panels and charity events, always framed by strength and quiet confidence. Looking back, the scandal that once threatened to define her became the very thing that redefined her. In a world obsessed with scandal and spectacle, her story reminded people that dignity, when defended, can change everything. It wasn't about revenge or drama, it was about choosing self-respect when the world expected surrender. 1 year later, she was not just surviving, she was thriving. And in every step she took, holding her daughter's tiny hand, she carried a message louder than any headline: when they try to break you, rise. Not for applause, but for yourself.